Good morning today, Your Honor.
Good morning.
I want to start out by thanking you for giving us a fair trial. I want to thank the jurors for the amount of time that they put in to judge this trial. This time being on this trial, I was able to see how the jurors are put in a tough position to, sit there and judge someone's life, and, it's a hard decision, and I felt like they made the wrong judgment. I've done things in my life, I'm not perfect, but the things I've been accused of, I know that I haven't done those things. I know it's typical for a person to come up here and, show remorse to, crimes that they have done, but I can only show remorse to the people that I know that was in this trial, which is Kiara Adams, Deanna Sanders, and Jasmine Brown. Not remorse on behalf of like I did anything to them, because if you know me, and people who really know me know that I wouldn't force anybody to do anything. I met women, I dated women who were doing escort or whatever, however people want to look at it from a moral standpoint, but who was doing these things as a grown woman. I've only dealt with grown women. Nothing was forced. Nothing was coerced or anything of that nature. If you notice, before this trial, no woman can say anything about me before this trial.
On the evening of January 29th, 2021, authorities executed a search warrant in DeKalb County, Georgia. The operation targeted the home of John Michael Gibson, a rising figure in the music industry. What began as a standard investigation quickly expanded into a case that revealed extensive digital and physical evidence. Multiple phones, electronic devices, and online postings were collected, all pointing to an operation larger than initially reported. In February 2021, federal and state investigators confirmed the scope of the case. Evidence suggested that women connected to Gibson were not merely associates or business partners. Records of transportation, communication, and financial exchanges indicated an organized system that extended across state lines. Reports were compiled, showing repeated patterns of recruitment, control, and exploitation. By March 2021, prosecutors announced formal charges. The indictment named Gibson and several associates, including family members, under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, or RICO. The charges listed included human trafficking, aggravated assault, and rape. Court documents describe the operation as structured and deliberate, with roles assigned to different individuals in support of the enterprise. The trial was scheduled for 2022. During proceedings, jurors were presented with evidence gathered over months of investigation. This included text message chains, online advertisements, witness statements, and testimony from investigators. Prosecutors outlined how the network operated, while the defense attempted to dispute the credibility of the accounts and the interpretation of the evidence. The case concluded with a conviction. Sentencing finalized the outcome, marking the transition of Gibson's public identity from entertainer to convicted criminal. What began with a single search warrant in early 2021 unfolded into one of the most significant trafficking cases tied to a public figure in recent years. If you enjoy real crime stories that uncover the truth, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us share real cases, spread awareness, and give a voice to those who can't speak for themselves. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Uncovered, where we examine the cases that shake communities and expose what happens behind closed doors. Real stories, real people, real impact. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. One of the earliest accounts came from a woman who met John Michael Gibson at a gas station in Hapeville. She was in a period of personal crisis when he approached her. Gibson offered assistance, suggesting that he could provide housing and financial support. She agreed to follow him, believing the offer to be genuine. Instead, what followed was a situation that escalated into rape. Soon after, she was forced into prostitution under Gibson's control. Survivors testified that food and basic necessities were withheld as a form of discipline. Compliance was rewarded with meals, while resistance led to starvation and further restriction. This created dependency and established a foundation of control. In 2015, another victim recounted her encounter with Gibson under the pretense of a modeling opportunity. She was invited to what she believed was a professional meeting in Marietta. The situation quickly changed when she was taken to a hotel room. There, she was robbed and raped. Following the assault, the victim described the psychological aftermath: fear, shame, and confusion that prevented her from immediately reporting the incident to law enforcement. The attack served as one of the earliest documented examples of how Gibson used false promises to lure victims into dangerous situations. Testimony from Gibson's ex-girlfriend revealed the structure of his operations in a midtown condo. At the beginning, she believed their relationship was authentic. Over time, it became clear that she was being used to facilitate his trafficking business. She testified that she was tasked with recruiting other women, collecting their earnings, and turning the money over to Gibson. Her movements were restricted, and surveillance within the home ensured she complied with his demands. What began as a personal relationship shifted into a system of exploitation, where she played a forced role in expanding his network. Another account centered on a woman who met Gibson through social media. Communication online led to in-person meetings, and eventually she began staying with him in a Buckhead condo. Their relationship was marked by control and conflict, particularly when she became pregnant. She alleged that he assaulted her during this time. Despite leaving once, she returned, a decision shaped by manipulation and psychological pressure. This pattern of leaving and returning highlighted the coercive tactics used to maintain dominance. Additional victims presented a consistent pattern of abuse. Gibson allegedly forced women to advertise themselves online for prostitution. All money they earned was confiscated by him. Some accounts describe physical violence, including an allegation that he used his vehicle to strike a woman. These details revealed escalating brutality, combining physical intimidation with financial and psychological manipulation to keep victims under his control. Gibson's music label, Pyra's Music Group, functioned as more than a creative outlet. Prosecutors argued it served as a front for trafficking activities. Women were promised opportunities in music, modeling, and entertainment, but instead were coerced into sex work. The label gave the operation a veneer of legitimacy, allowing Gibson to mask criminal activity within a professional framework. Evidence introduced during the trial showed extensive communication, records retrieved from multiple phones seized during the investigation. Messages documented pricing for sexual services, coordination of meeting locations, and exchanges concerning the victims. Survivors testified that basic needs such as food and shelter were withheld unless they complied with demands. Manipulation reinforced dependency, while isolation prevented outside contact. Victims described being cut off from family and friends, leaving them reliant on Gibson. This system created psychological and financial dependency, ensuring compliance even without physical confinement in every case. Testimony and evidence also implicated family members. Gibson's mother, widely referred to as Mama Cash, was identified as having a role in managing finances and facilitating the operations. His cousin, Tyrone Taylor, was named as a co-leader, overseeing recruitment and supervising victims. Prosecutors argued that the involvement of family created a multi-layered structure that resembled organized crime. Their participation expanded the scope of the enterprise, turning it into a coordinated operation rather than a single individual's actions. Law enforcement began to receive reports from victims who managed to escape or come into contact with authorities. These initial statements raised suspicion of a broader pattern rather than isolated incidents. Authorities launched surveillance operations and, in some cases, undercover investigations to confirm details provided by victims. Patterns of movement, recruitment, and financial activity began to align with victim testimony. A critical breakthrough occurred with the seizure of multiple phones from Gibson. The devices contained incriminating evidence, text messages discussing sexual services, prices, victim movement, and instructions to associates. This digital trail provided prosecutors with hard evidence to support survivor accounts. By 2022, evidence was sufficient to present before a grand jury. Gibson was indicted on 41 counts, including rape, aggravated sodomy, trafficking, racketeering, pimping, pandering, and firearms violations. The charges outlined not only individual assaults, but the existence of a coordinated criminal enterprise. Prosecutors pursued the case under Georgia's RICO, Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations, laws. This allowed them to frame Gibson's activities not as disconnected crimes, but as part of an organized system designed to profit from exploitation. The use of RICO statutes emphasized the structure and longevity of the operation, making the case not just about individual assaults, but about a criminal enterprise comparable to organized crime syndicates. The trial of John Michael Gibson, known publicly by his stage name Cash Out, began in mid-2025 after years of investigation and indictment under Georgia's Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations RICO Act. The case spanned multiple charges, including sex trafficking, rape, aggravated sodomy, racketeering, and weapons violations. The proceedings lasted approximately 7 weeks, drawing widespread media attention and presenting the court with extensive testimony, digital records, and expert analysis. The trial opened in June 2025 with jury selection, followed by the formal presentation of charges. Gibson stood trial alongside his mother, Linda Smith, and cousin, Tyrone Taylor, both accused of roles in trafficking and racketeering operation. The prosecution framed the case as one of organized exploitation, carried out under the guise of music label and personal relationships. Across 7 weeks, multiple victims took the stand, supported by law enforcement officers, forensic analysts, and trafficking experts. The prosecution structured its case around the core allegations of rape, sodomy, and sex trafficking, linking them to the broader RICO framework by arguing that the crimes were part of an organized criminal enterprise. The trial's central evidence came from survivor testimony. Several women described how they were recruited, manipulated, and forced into prostitution. Accounts detailed encounters that began with promises of support, career opportunities, or relationships, only to shift into coercion, threats, and control. One witness testified about being approached at a gas station and offered help during a period of crisis. She described being taken to a residence where sexual assault occurred, followed by ongoing forced participation in prostitution. According to her account, compliance was monitored and controlled, with food and basic needs used as leverage. Another testimony described a 2015 incident at a Marietta hotel. The witness explained that she was misled with an offer of a modeling opportunity, only to be assaulted and robbed once isolated. She testified that fear and intimidation prevented her from reporting the crime at the time. A former girlfriend of Gibson also testified, describing how she initially believed she was in a personal relationship before discovering that she was being used to recruit other women. She stated that she was instructed to manage earnings from prostitution and that her movements were restricted to maintain control. Other accounts included incidents of physical violence, forced posting of online ads for prostitution, and manipulation that led some women to return even after leaving. Witnesses consistently described a pattern of exploitation, isolation, and threats that aligned with the prosecution's argument of systematic trafficking. The defense argued that the alleged victims had willingly engaged in the activities described. Attorneys claimed that the sexual encounters in prostitution were consensual and that Gibson was not coercing or exploiting the women. The defense attempted to discredit witnesses by focusing on inconsistencies in their testimonies, prior criminal histories, or continued contact with Gibson after alleged abuse. Lawyers questioned why some women returned after initially leaving, presenting this as evidence that no force or coercion was involved. Another key element of the defense was a denial of any connection between the music label and the trafficking allegations. Attorneys argued that Pyra's music group functioned solely as a legitimate business venture and was not a cover for criminal activity. The prosecution relied on a combination of victim testimony and physical evidence. 8 mobile phones seized during the investigation contained text messages that prosecutors presented as coordination of prostitution activities, including price arrangements, meeting locations, and instructions on managing earnings. Online advertisements linked to escort services were introduced, many of which prosecutors said had been created and controlled under Gibson's direction. Victim testimonies across different incidents showed consistency in patterns of behavior, methods of coercion, and the structure of the operation. This consistency was emphasized as proof of a deliberate and organized scheme rather than unrelated encounters. Expert witnesses on sex trafficking explain how manipulation, psychological control, and coercion can prevent victims from leaving, even when opportunities exist. They testified that factors such as dependency on basic needs, fear of retaliation, and trauma bonding contribute to continued involvement, undermining the defense's claims of consensual participation. After weeks of testimony and presentation of evidence, the jury deliberated for several days. They returned with a verdict of guilty on multiple counts, including RICO violations, sex trafficking, rape, and aggravated sodomy. While some charges were dismissed or not proven beyond reasonable doubt, the key counts were upheld. John Michael Gibson was sentenced to life imprisonment for rape, a concurrent life sentence for aggravated sodomy, and an additional 70 years for sex trafficking, racketeering, firearm possession, pimping, pandering, and obstruction charges. Linda Smith-Mother received a 30-year sentence for her involvement in the racketeering and trafficking operation. Tyrone Taylor, cousin, was sentenced to life plus 94 years for multiple counts, including trafficking and violent offenses. All 3 defendants were ordered to register as sex offenders. They were barred from parole eligibility and restricted from entering specific areas of Atlanta, including Fulton Industrial Boulevard, a location prosecutors linked to trafficking activity. They were also prohibited from contacting victims or individuals connected to the case. In delivering the sentences, the presiding judge described the conduct as diabolical and representative of modern slavery. The court emphasized the severity of the crimes and the long-term harm caused to victims, citing these factors as justification for maximum sentencing. The conclusion of the trial marked one of the most severe trafficking-related sentences handed down under Georgia's RICO framework. The case demonstrated how music industry platforms and personal influence could be used as tools of exploitation. For law enforcement and prosecutors, it became an example of the application of racketeering statutes to human trafficking operations. While the trial ended with definitive convictions and lengthy sentences, testimony revealed the long-lasting effects on survivors, many of whom continue to live with trauma and disruption caused by the events described in court. When the trial concluded and sentencing was delivered, the focus shifted to the long-term consequences for the survivors, the public, and the broader system that allowed the crimes to continue for years. The impact extended beyond one individual and moved into a discussion about celebrity, exploitation, and accountability under the law. The survivors who testified in court described the permanent effects of their experiences. Statements read during sentencing outlined recurring trauma, the development of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and the difficulty of reclaiming a normal life. Several women explained that they continue to live with fear, vivid memories of abuse, and distrust of people in positions of power. These details were presented directly to the judge and jury, forming a record of the harm inflicted beyond the physical acts themselves. Medical professionals and counselors who worked with some of the victims explained in documents submitted to the court that PTSD symptoms included nightmares, hypervigilance, panic attacks, and long-term emotional numbing. The survivors also reported difficulty in maintaining employment, pursuing education, or building stable personal relationships after leaving Gibson's control. For some, therapy and support groups provided limited stability, but the process of recovery remained ongoing. Although the guilty verdicts and life sentences brought a measure of security in knowing that Gibson and his co-defendants would no longer direct access to them, survivors emphasized that relief was not the same as closure. Many said the scars of coercion, isolation, and violence would remain with them permanently. These statements were not framed as emotional pleas, but as documentation of the continuing consequences of trafficking and abuse. News coverage of the trial and sentencing was widespread, with local and national outlets reporting the outcome. The public reaction was one of shock at the details revealed in court, particularly because Gibson had once been seen as a successful figure in the music industry. For years, his public image was associated with hit singles and performances, while his private activities were concealed from view. The contrast between celebrity status and criminal enterprise became a central theme in media reporting. The case was frequently compared to other high-profile RICO indictments within Atlanta's rap community. Observers noted similarities with cases involving Young Thug and YFN Lucci, both accused of using music-related organizations as covers for organized crime activity. However, the Gibson case stood apart because it involved sex trafficking, coercion, and the exploitation of vulnerable women rather than gang-related violence more common in other indictments. This distinction drew additional media attention because it highlighted another form of organized crime linked to celebrity culture. Public discourse on social media reflected disbelief that someone with national recognition and financial success would operate a trafficking network. Journalists covering the sentencing described the courtroom as a place where the duality of fame and crime was fully exposed. Commentary and editorials and talk shows pointed to a failure of industry oversight, as red flags surrounding Gibson's activities appear to have been overlooked for years. The trial exposed several vulnerabilities within both the music industry and broader society. First, it revealed how celebrity status can be used to manipulate, recruit, and silence victims. Survivors testified that Gibson's status as a rapper made him appear trustworthy, especially when he presented opportunities for modeling or music-related work. The promise of fame was a powerful recruitment tool, allowing him to disguise coercion as opportunity. Second, the case highlighted how trafficking can operate behind the facade of legitimate business ventures. Prosecutors argued that Gibson used Pyra's music group as a front to disguise criminal activity. By associating the trafficking enterprise with a record label, Gibson was able to present operations as legitimate to outsiders. This blurred the line between entertainment and organized crime, making detection more difficult. Third, the case demonstrated the importance of digital evidence in modern trafficking prosecutions. Investigators recovered multiple phones containing text messages, digital advertisements for prostitution, and records of financial transactions. These details were crucial in proving not only individual acts of abuse, but also the structure of an organized criminal enterprise. This reinforced the need for law enforcement to monitor digital platforms and communications in order to identify trafficking activity hidden within ordinary technology use. Finally, the case underscored the need for stronger anti-trafficking measures, particularly within industries where vulnerable individuals seek opportunities. Advocates use the outcome to call for new systems of oversight, including vetting of music labels, management groups, and promoters. They argued that the entertainment industry must take responsibility for protecting individuals who enter with the expectation of career advancement, but instead encounter exploitation. Although the trial concluded with convictions and sentencing, legal experts noted that appeals were possible. Defense attorneys signaled intent to challenge the verdict on grounds of evidentiary issues and witness credibility. However, prosecutors emphasized that the case rested on a strong foundation of digital evidence, corroborated testimony, and consistent accounts from multiple victims. Observers stated that the combination of physical evidence and witness testimony created a difficult path for any appeal to succeed. The case also set a precedent in prosecuting celebrities under RICO statutes for trafficking crimes. While RICO had previously been applied to organized crime, gangs, and drug operations, its use in the Gibson case expanded its scope. Prosecutors successfully argued that the trafficking operation constituted an enterprise involving multiple actors, family members, and fronts. This approach demonstrated that organized crime laws could be applied to celebrity-led trafficking networks, opening the door for future cases to follow a similar model. Legal analysts predicted that the Gibson trial would be studied as a benchmark in anti-trafficking prosecutions. The strategies used in building the case, seizing phones, linking digital records to real-world acts, and framing the operation as a criminal enterprise, were seen as tools that could strengthen future prosecutions. The case may also influence how prosecutors pursue charges in other industries where coercion and exploitation overlap with legitimate business structures. The aftermath of the John Michael Gibson case represents the fall of a public figure who transitioned from fame to life imprisonment. His music career, once defined by chart-topping singles, was permanently overshadowed by convictions for trafficking, rape, and racketeering. The transition from celebrated artist to convicted criminal illustrated the sharp divide between public image and private reality. The trial also reinforced the central role of victims' voices in uncovering hidden truth. Survivor testimonies provided direct evidence of the coercion, isolation, and abuse that formed the basis of the case. Their statements, combined with digital records, dismantled the facade of legitimacy that Gibson presented through his music career. At a larger level, the case served as a warning about the abuse of power, fame, and trust. It demonstrated how celebrity can be weaponized as a tool of exploitation, how legitimate industries can serve as covers for criminal activity, and how vulnerable individuals can be targeted under the guise of opportunity. The sentencing provided accountability, but the long-term trauma carried by survivors remained a reminder that justice in the courtroom does not erase harm. Ultimately, the Gibson case forced both the public and the industry to confront uncomfortable realities about exploitation in entertainment. Justice was delivered in legal terms, but a shadow of trauma persists as a lasting consequence. The story concluded in court, but its implications extend far beyond one individual, shaping conversations about celebrity, accountability, and protection against trafficking in the future. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.